You've probably noticed the signs by now. They're everywhere, just blended right into normal daily life. Like that diner down the street closing early on Tuesdays, or nurses at your local hospital looking completely wiped out. Or that big construction project near your house that's been sitting dead for months, with all the gear just gathering dust. When we see this stuff, we instantly look for the easiest, simplest answer, something that fits on a bumper sticker. We say businesses just need to pay people more, or we complain that an entire generation is just lazy and doesn't want to work. But those answers are completely missing the point. This isn't a temporary bad mood, it's a massive, permanent shift. The real issue is way bigger, and it's not going away. See, America isn't actually running out of open jobs. It's not running out of investors, and it's not out of money. It's literally running out of physical human beings to do the work. And that forces us to look at the big picture and ask a question that sounds totally crazy. Is America running out of workers? To understand how the biggest economy in the world got stuck like this, we have to look at how our society is actually built. Every single modern economy on Earth relies on one massive, invisible rule that we never talk about out loud. The absolute guarantee that there will always be more and more young people entering the workforce to support the system. Think of these working-age people as the concrete pillars holding up the weight of everything: schools, roads, hospitals, everything. As long as you keep adding columns every year, the bridge stays rock solid, the weight spreads out, and the economy grows. Except right now in America, that foundational 100-year-old rule is officially starting to break down. For decades, the US economy never had to worry about this because, demographically, the country got incredibly lucky. Right after World War II, there was a massive explosion in births, the baby boom, flooding the system with millions of future workers. Then, right as that wave hit the market, a second massive wave arrived. Women entered the formal workforce in record numbers. In just a few years, this huge social shift basically doubled the number of active workers practically overnight. Add in a steady, decades-long stream of young, driven immigrants, and America had an absolute mountain of labor. This endless supply of young minds and hands created an illusion. We started believing that this growth would last forever. We built our retirements, our companies, our hospitals, and our taxes around the math of an endless workforce. But a machine built only for endless growth completely breaks down when the fuel stops coming. And today, it stopped. That massive generation that built the modern world, the baby boomers, are now retiring by the tens of thousands every single day. They are leaving a massive, unprecedented hole in experience and raw numbers as they walk out the door. And the generations coming up behind them to fill those empty desks are just fundamentally, mathematically smaller. Birth rates have been dropping steadily for years, driven by deep, permanent changes in how we live our lives. This isn't a political debate, a culture war, or a temporary trend that a tiny corporate tax break can fix. It is hard, cold math, and the brutal truth is incredibly simple. You cannot hire workers who were never born. When you pull these human columns out from under the bridge, the system doesn't just crash down in a dramatic Hollywood crisis. Instead, it triggers a slow, invisible chain reaction where one broken system silently reaches out and drags down the next one. Look at healthcare. As that massive older generation gets older, the actual demand on hospitals is absolutely skyrocketing. Because specialized nurses and doctors are suddenly super scarce, hospitals have to aggressively jack up wages to fight over talent. This desperate battle for workers drives up the baseline cost of care, forcing insurance premiums for everyday families to go through the roof. Since local and state governments now have to pour way more tax money into covering public health care like Medicaid, budgets choke. With all that money diverted just to survive, there's less left over to fix roads, patch bridges, or maintain the power grid. As a result, our roads degrade even faster, which means the heavy construction industry suddenly needs even more workers to fix them. But those workers aren't there. So infrastructure crumbles, transit gets slower, supply chains plug up, and everyday stuff gets more expensive. The labor shortage doesn't just stay in one corner of the economy, it loops right back around, feeding on itself, making the crisis worse. When a business owner gets trapped in this loop, their immediate common sense instinct is obvious. Just raise wages. Pay more, get the workers. It's the basic law of supply and demand that we've all been taught since Econ 101. But this is exactly why raising wages cannot actually fix a structural demographic shortage. Higher wages are great for moving existing workers between competing companies. They cannot create brand new workers out of thin air. If a big supermarket chain offers $5 more an hour, they might successfully steal a driver from a local trucking firm. The supermarket temporarily fixes their problem, but now the wider supply chain has a critical bottleneck. You haven't actually fixed the national worker shortage. You've just paid a massive premium to move the leak to a different pipe. In the past, America had a reliable escape hatch for this game of musical chairs. When domestic supply ran thin, we looked outward. If we lacked raw muscle or specialized tech talent at home, we just imported it from a young, rapidly growing global population. Immigration was the ultimate safety valve, balancing the books whenever the domestic birth rate dipped. But this is where the hidden system hits its biggest, most profound, and most surprising twist. Previous generations could easily borrow youth and energy from the rest of the developing world to keep the American engine running. Today, there is nowhere left to borrow workers from. The demographic ceiling hasn't just dropped for America, it's closing in globally. The reality of a rapidly aging population isn't just a local American headache anymore, it's a global reality. Europe is graying way faster than the US, with entire rural villages emptying out and elementary schools closing down for good. China's massive working-age population, the engine that literally powered global manufacturing for a generation, has already peaked and is actively shrinking. Across East Asia, countries like South Korea and Japan are seeing birth rates plummet to historic, shocking lows that break standard economic models. You can easily import physical products, and you can import temporary labor. But you cannot import a generation when the whole planet is getting old. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution began, America isn't just competing with the company across the street for talent. It is locked in a massive global competition with every other aging superpower for a rapidly shrinking worldwide pool of young, productive human beings. Hit by this global wall, an economic system built entirely on the assumption of endless human labor has no choice but to radically reinvent itself. We are already seeing the first desperate steps of this adaptation everywhere we look. It's driving the massive, multi-billion-dollar rush toward automation. It is the hidden force behind the sudden corporate obsession with artificial intelligence and advanced humanoids. We are pushing retirement ages back, trying to boost individual output with tech, and trying to engineer our way past basic biology. These massive upgrades aren't just routine corporate software tools built to squeeze out a tiny bit more profit next quarter. They are the fundamental survival gears of a high-energy civilization, suddenly realizing it's running critically low on its primary fuel. America might be one of the very first places where regular people are starting to notice this friction in their daily lives. But as those support columns continue to thin out under the weight of the global road, it definitely won't be the last. Because this was never just a news story about restaurants closing early, wage fights, or temporary hiring issues. It's a story about what happens when an entire economic architecture engineered for endless labor growth hits an era where human labor is scarce. For nearly 2 centuries, modern civilization asked one defining question: how do we create more jobs? The next century may ask a very different question: how do we create more workers? And if people become the world's most valuable resource, what happens when the only way to grow the workforce is no longer more people?